Mama!
I used to believe that sending money meant I was being a good son. That as long as the bills were paid, my absence didn't matter. I told myself she was strong. She had always been strong. Strong enough to wait. Strong enough to forgive. Strong enough to survive without me. I didn't hear the silence growing around her. I didn't notice how quiet the house became. How the nights grew longer. How the river behind our home never stopped rising. When people asked why I didn't come back sooner, I said I was busy. I said I was building a future. What I didn't say was that I was afraid of returning to a place where I still owed too much. By the time I finally decided to come home, I wasn't coming to save her. I was coming to collect what I thought would always be there. But the river doesn't wait, and neither does guilt. I didn't lose my mother that night. I lost her long before, the moment I chose distance over duty, success over presence, and silence over protection. This is not a story about how she died. It's a story about how I failed her. Long before the water ever touched her, the house still stood, the door still opened. But my mother was gone. Mama Aduni had once been a strong woman. Not the kind of strength people boast about, not unbreakable for applause, not enduring for display. Her strength came from having no other choice. When life pressed a Nigerian black woman into poverty, into scarcity, into days that seemed to have no exit, there was only one option left: stand upright and keep going. She gave birth to Kunnel in a small tin-roofed room at the edge of the village, where rain drummed on the metal roof like war drums. She remembered that night clearly, the rain pouring, the power out, the house lit only by an oil lamp. She bit her lip and cried without sound, not wanting to wake her mother-in-law, not wanting the neighbors to hear. When Kunnel let out his first cry, she laughed through tears, a laugh filled with both joy and fear. Because from that moment on, she knew her life no longer belonged to herself alone. In the years that followed, Kunnel grew up among red dirt roads, endless rainy seasons, and nights without electricity. Blackouts were normal. What was unusual were the nights when there was power and she stayed awake, sewing under the light to earn a few extra coins. By day, she went to the market with a basket balanced on her head, selling beans, vegetables, anything people were willing to buy. By night, she shelled peanuts one by one, patched torn clothes, and listened closely to the sound of her son breathing as he slept. That sound was what brought her peace. It was proof that she was still here. Kunnel was not an easy child to raise. He fell sick often, coughed often, and from a young age carried sadness in his eyes, the kind of sadness children have when they see too much too early. His mother asking for credit at the rice stall, his mother straining to draw water, his mother lowering her head before cold words. But Kunnel was also bright. He learned quickly. He remembered everything. Whenever he received a new notebook, he held it as if it were more precious than food. Mama Aduni watched him, her heart tightening. She understood. If her son was ever going to have a path, that path would have to pass through education. There were days she ate only one meal so Kunnel could pay his school fees. She never told him. She only smiled and said, "I'm full." At night, when her stomach growled in the dark, she turned her face to the wall and clenched her teeth so no sound would escape. She was afraid he would hear, afraid he would carry guilt with him. And she never wanted her son to carry any burden except the burden of living with decency. People like to say strong women don't cry. But Mama Aduni cried often. She just cried where no one could see. She cried while washing dishes, while doing laundry, while standing alone by the river when the rain fell. She cried for her husband who died too young, for a life that showed little mercy, for herself, because she too was only a woman. But after every cry, she wiped her face, stood up, and went back to work. No applause, no awards, only tomorrow waiting. And she had to face it before it broke her. Connell grew older. And when he began talking about Lagos, his voice lit up like a flame. "Mom, I want to go to the city. I want to do something bigger. I don't want you to suffer anymore." Mama Aduni listened with both pride and fear. Pride, because her son had dreams. Fear, because she knew Lagos was not only opportunity. Lagos was a place that swallowed people whole. The night before Connell left, she didn't sleep. She sat at the doorway, staring down the red dirt road under pale moonlight. The wind carried the damp smell of the river. The house was quiet, but her heart was as loud as a marketplace. She remembered Connell as a barefoot child running across the yard, laughing freely. She remembered carrying him on her back to the market, sweat soaking her clothes while he slept, his breath warm against her skin. Now her son was about to leave. He would no longer rest on her back. He would walk on his own feet, and might walk so far that he wouldn't return in time. That morning, she woke early and cooked a small pot of jollof rice. Not because they had plenty, but because she wanted her son to eat well before leaving. She packed him some food, a few coins, and one of her old scarves. It was faded, but clean and scented with soap. She placed it in his hands, forcing her voice to sound normal. "Take this. Lagos is cold. And people's hearts are colder." Connell laughed and hugged her. "You sound like you're trying to scare me, Mama." Mama Aduni smiled too, but her eyes were wet. "No, I'm just reminding you. Don't let the city teach you to forget home." When it was time for the bus to leave, the village felt smaller. The red dirt road to the bus stop seemed endless. Mother and son stood before the door of the old bus. Connell climbed aboard, then turned to look at her. In that moment, Mama Aduni felt as if someone squeezed her heart tight. She wanted to say so many things. "Come back soon. Don't forget to call. I'm afraid." But she knew if she said them, her son might hesitate. And she did not want her fear to cage his dreams. So she did what many mothers do when they are not brave enough to speak the truth. She smiled. A strained smile, standing firm, pretending everything would be fine. "Go," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I'm used to waiting." Connell nodded, eyes red. He stepped inside. The door closed. The bus shuddered, then pulled away, kicking up clouds of red dust. Mama Aduni stood there, waving, until the bus disappeared around the bend, until the dust settled, until the road became empty again. When everyone else went back inside, she remained a while longer. Then she turned and walked home. Each step felt heavier with another piece of age. She stayed in the old house by the river, where the rainy season brought not only water, but the roar of memory, where the night wind through the trees sounded like sighs, where every afternoon she watched the river and thought of the distant city that had taken her son away, and where every rainy season returned with fear. Lagos swallowed Connell, not in the loud, dramatic way people like to tell in movies, but quietly day by day, hour by hour, until one day he looked back and realized he had become someone else, faster, harder, quieter, and always in a hurry. The city never slept. In the morning, he woke to the sound of car horns scraping against his nerves like metal, the smell of gasoline, road dust, and human sweat packed into crowded buses blended into something unmistakable, the smell of Lagos. Once you breathed it in, you never forgot. Connell arrived in the city wearing worn-out sandals and carrying an old cloth bag. Inside were a few changes of clothes, a small notebook, and a photograph of his mother, Mama Aduni, standing in front of their modest house near the river back home. His first night, he slept beneath the awning of a closed shop, curled up against the cold night wind, his heart burning with determination. He heard laughter, distant music, an argument that suddenly went silent. He told himself, "Just a few months, just until I find work, just until I can send money home to my mother." Those few months stretched into years. Lagos taught him how to survive first, and only later, how to live. By day, he worked construction, carrying cement, mixing mortar, standing on scaffolding, and looking down at traffic flowing like a river that never ran dry. By night, he took extra shifts at a roadside restaurant, wiping tables, carrying plates, collecting small tips, and slipping them into his pocket like hidden pieces of hope. There were nights his hands trembled from exhaustion, moments when he felt like nothing more than a shadow. But whenever he thought of giving up, he pulled out his mother's photo. Her eyes in the picture were gentle and deep, the eyes of a Nigerian woman who had known loss, yet still carried a quiet light, as if she believed her son would one day return. Connell climbed the ladder slowly. A site manager noticed his discipline and gave him a chance to supervise a small team. A friend encouraged him to learn computer skills at night, cheap courses, borrowed videos watched on an old phone. He studied through hunger and sleepless nights. He learned by swallowing his shame when he didn't understand what others did. Then one day, he stepped off the construction site, put on a white shirt, and walked into an air-conditioned office. His desk no longer carried cement dust. His hands no longer cracked from mortar. People began calling him Mr. Connell. They spoke of him as a man who had risen from nothing. He smiled. But his heart was not always light, because every success carried a piece of life he had left behind. At first, he called his mother regularly, long calls. Her voice warm, like an old blanket. "Connell, have you eaten? Is it raining in Lagos? Are you getting enough sleep?" He told her small things, that he'd been praised at work, that he'd met kind people, that he'd eaten a hot meal. On the other end, Mama Aduni laughed, her voice slightly hoarse but tender. "I'm happy. As long as you live with decency, that's enough for me." Some of her words softened his heart completely. "Don't forget to pray. Don't let Lagos make you forget who you are," Connell promised. At the time, he believed his promise was solid as stone. But Lagos did not care about promises. Lagos cared only about momentum. As work increased, the calls grew shorter. "Mom, I'm busy, I'll call later." When the money started arriving more regularly, he believed he was doing the right thing. He sent money, more money, on time every month as proof that he was still a good son. He believed money could walk the red dirt road back to the small house by the river, that it could sit beside his mother at night, that it could cook for her, fetch water for her, keep loneliness away. He did not realize what his mother needed most had never fit inside an envelope. Once, she called during his work hours. His phone lit up. "Mama," he hesitated. His boss was watching. He declined the call. "I'll call later," he thought. But later does not always come. That evening, he called back. His mother answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay, my son. I just wanted to hear your voice." He forced a laugh, tried to sound cheerful. "You miss me that much, Mama?" There was a pause on the line. Then she spoke softly like the wind. "I don't want to be a burden. I know you're busy. The river sounds very loud tonight." Connell froze. He wanted to ask, "Are you afraid?" But the question frightened him too, as if saying it out loud would make the fear real. He changed the subject. "Promised again. I'll come home soon, Mama." She replied, "Okay," just one word. But it felt like something dropped inside his chest. The promise of soon stretched across years. For those who leave home, soon is sometimes not a time, but an illusion to help them sleep at night. Soon when he stabilized, soon when he got promoted, soon when he got married, soon when he bought his first car. Each time he said soon, he saw his life like a wall under construction. Just one more brick, just a little more. His wife, Saad, was a beautiful, intelligent Nigerian woman, with sharp eyes and a quiet exhaustion beneath her makeup. She once loved Connell's determination. She believed in the story of changing their lives. But as city life dragged on, as trips home were postponed again and again, she began to sigh whenever Connell spoke of his mother. "You're sending money again?" He nodded. "My mother needs it. Saad didn't say everything out loud, but Kunal understood. In Lagos, people live by calculation. In Lagos, emotions are sometimes treated like expenses. She didn't hate his mother. She hated the feeling of sharing an already tight life with a distant presence she had never truly touched. Kunal tried to balance everything. To be a good son, a successful husband, to hold on to home while moving forward. And in that struggle, he chose what the city always rewarded: progress. One night, after a day that drained him completely, he sat alone in their small apartment, listening to rain tapping the window. He opened a voice message his mother had sent because the signal was weak. "Kunal, I felt dizzy today. But I'm fine, don't worry, just remember to eat." Her voice trembled slightly, an old woman pretending to be strong. He wanted to call immediately, but his phone battery died. And again, he thought, tomorrow. Tomorrow came with meetings. The week came with deadlines. The month came with what people called the future. He grew used to not knowing what his mother ate, how she slept. He grew used to tucking a small worry into the corner of his heart and covering it with work. He grew used to telling himself, "Every time she needs something, I send money. Everything I'm doing for her." But truth does not argue. It waits. One evening on his way home, he passed an old man selling fruit by the roadside. The man looked at him, smiled, and said something ordinary. "My son." Money cannot hold on to the elderly. Kunal stopped. He wanted to protest. "I'm taking care of my mother." But the words stuck in his throat. Because suddenly he realized he was caring for her in the easiest way. The measurable way. And the things that couldn't be measured: time, presence, a hug he had let slip away for too long. That night, he called his mother, determined to talk for a long time. The phone rang and rang. Then a neighbor answered, hurried. "Hello? Kunal? Your mother, she's asleep. Call back tomorrow." "Is she okay?" Kunal asked. There was a very small pause. Then the neighbor said, "She's fine. People only hesitate when something is wrong." Kunal looked out the window. Lagos was still bright. Cars still moved. People still laughed. The city was still consuming his time as if it were food. And in that moment, Kunal felt afraid. Not because his mother was weak, but because he finally understood. He had been saving his mother, like saving a place to return to, without knowing if that place was still waiting. He sent money home regularly, but he did not send time. The calls grew shorter. The promise of "I'll come home soon" stretched across years. Kunal believed money could replace presence. He was wrong. Saad, Kunal's wife, had never wanted to live in that house. From the very first day she set foot in the village, she knew this place was not meant for her. Not because she hated the countryside. Saad herself was a Nigerian black woman, raised under harsh sun and the smell of damp earth, but because this house carried an atmosphere that made people feel smaller. The peeling walls, the tin roof rattling whenever the wind blew, and behind it all the river, lying there like a dark mouth, always sounding as if it were whispering someone's name. She had lived in Lagos with Kunal for a short time before marriage. They weren't rich, but there were streetlights, music, shops, a sense that life was moving forward. There, Saad could step outside without having to explain who she was. There, exhaustion could be hidden behind busyness. Here, everything was exposed. Poverty sat right on the dining mat, in the endless sound of flowing water, in the silence of long evenings and unbroken rainy days. The old house, the aging mother-in-law, and the river constantly growling behind them. All of it made her feel trapped. Mama Aduni was not the cruel kind of mother-in-law, not sharp-tongued, not controlling. She was gentle. So gentle it sometimes irritated Saad. She didn't compete. She didn't criticize. She didn't raise her voice. She simply lived quietly, like an old shadow belonging to the house. But it was that very quietness that suffocated Saad. It made her feel like an intruder, like someone who came too late, like someone forced to carry a history she had never chosen. When Kunal decided to return to Lagos for work, he told Saad gently but firmly, like a nail driven deep, "Just a few months. I'll get settled, then I'll bring you up. My mother, she can't handle the city." Saad looked at him, at his hands. The hands of a man who had once been poor, once been hungry, and was building his life with sheer will. She loved him for that. But love is not always enough to make someone happy living in a place they never wanted. She nodded. At the time, she still believed a few months meant a few months. But Lagos has a way of stretching every promise. At first, Saad was patient. She cooked, washed clothes, cleaned the house. She called Kunal every night, listening to him talk about work, listening to the traffic behind his voice, a reminder that his world was moving forward while hers stood still. "Are you okay?" Kunal asked. Saad smiled, forcing her voice to sound light. "I'm fine. Your mother is fine. The house is fine." She said fine so many times it lost its meaning. In the village, time moved slowly. Days were measured by rooster calls, months by rainy seasons, years by the rising of the river. Every morning, Saad woke to the distant sound of the river, breathing like a large animal. Every afternoon, she watched tree shadows stretch long, watched the empty village road, watched other women pass by with baskets on their heads, and wondered, "Am I living or am I waiting?" Kunal's calls grew shorter. Not because he loved her less, but because he was tired, busy, swimming in a city where stopping for even one day meant being pulled under. Saad understood. But understanding did not make her less lonely. In Lagos, when she was sad, she could go outside, meet friends, walk through markets, buy something small, see lights, hear people. Here, her sadness had nowhere to hide. It lived in the small kitchen, in the wind whistling through the door cracks, in the figure of Mama Aduni sitting in the corner of the house, her eyes distant, as if speaking to the past. And then poverty began to bite into her patience. Kunal still sent money regularly, but it was never enough to turn this place into a life she wanted. Enough for rice, oil, medicine. Enough to patch the leaking roof a little. But not enough to buy her the feeling that she had a future. At the market, Saad heard other women talking. "My husband just bought a refrigerator. My sister in Lagos posted photos at a restaurant like a movie. The neighbor's daughter married rich, now she lives in Lekki." Those stories were like salt. No one threw it directly into a wound. It simply seeped in and burned. Saad began to compare. At first, it was only a small spark. But comparison never stays small. It grows, eats into every thought, and turns everything into lack. She looked at her rough hands from washing clothes and thought of glossy manicures she'd seen on Instagram. She looked at the old house and thought of air-conditioned apartments in Lagos. She looked at her life and thought, "I was not meant to be here." Every time Mama Aduni called out to her, "Saad, have you eaten? Saad, are you sleeping well? Saad, are you cold?" Saad answered politely, but inside something unnameable stirred, not hatred, not resentment, but fatigue, tired of answering, tired of having to be good. Tired of feeling that in this house she had no right to be weak and no right to be selfish. Mama Aduni grew weaker. At first, it was coughing, then dizziness, then pain in her legs, slower steps. She began forgetting small things, where she put the spoon, whether the door was locked. Some nights, she called Kunal's name in her sleep, her voice thin as paper. "Kunal, have you come home yet?" Saad heard it and felt a chill down her spine, because it reminded her that in this house existed a love she could never compete with, a mother's love for her son. And as time passed, that love felt like a shadow covering everything. Saad became her caregiver. No one said it out loud, but it became her responsibility naturally, like rainwater always finding the lowest place, cooking porridge, reminding her to take medicine, helping her to the bathroom, wiping her down when she was too weak to stand. One rainy afternoon, the power went out again. The house fell into darkness. Saad held an oil lamp and looked at Mama Aduni sitting on the bed, breathing hard, her eyes clouded like mist. Suddenly, Saad felt compassion. Real, human compassion, she thought. She's just an old woman. She hasn't done anything to me. But then the river roared behind the house, as if reminding her that compassion does not change a life. And inside her, a cold question surfaced. If I stay here forever, where will my life go? She called Kunnel that night, her voice exhausted. I can't take it anymore. Kunnel was silent for a moment, then spoke gently. I know. Just hold on a little longer. I'm almost done. How many times have you said that? Saad snapped. I'm not young enough to wait forever. I wasn't born to stay here taking care of illness for the rest of my life. Kunnel sighed. She's my mother, Saad. A simple sentence, but it felt like a door closing. Saad hung up. She sat in the darkness, listening to the rain and the river. She felt crushed between two things she could not defeat, duty and desire. And in between, there was only exhaustion. From that day on, the way she looked at Mama Aduni began to change. Not because the old woman became worse, but because the weight on Saad's shoulders grew heavier. Small tasks became annoyances. Questions became noise. Helping her walk felt like being pulled backward. One morning, Mama Aduni called out, Saad, my dear, come help me. Saad stood in the kitchen, spoon in hand, and felt her hands tremble, not from fear, but from a quiet anger with nowhere to go. Angry at Kunnel for leaving. Angry at life for being unfair. Angry at herself for loving a man whose love was always split in two, half for the future, half for his mother. Saad walked into the room and looked at her mother-in-law. Mama Aduni reached out her thin, trembling hand, her eyes apologizing before her words did. I trouble you too much. Just that one sentence, soft as air, made Saad choke. Because the woman was not demanding, she was apologizing for existing. And that hurt Saad even more. If Mama Aduni had been cruel, Saad could have hated her easily. But she was gentle, weak, fading like a lamp about to go out. And Saad, in her exhaustion, began to call all of it by a single word, so she wouldn't have to feel guilty anymore. Saad called it a burden. The rain poured without stopping. Not the kind that rages and clears like a child's tantrum. This was flood season rain, as if someone in the sky was dumping an entire ocean onto the thin tin roof of the old house. The rain hammered the roof like 1,000 hands pounding on a door, demanding to be let in. Wind shrieked through the cracks in the walls cold and sharp lashing skin like a whip. Darkness thickened, because the power had been out since afternoon. Only a small oil lamp sat on the table, its yellow flame trembling, like Mama Aduni's own breath. Inside that house, everything was damp. The air was damp. The walls were damp. The clothes were damp. Even worry felt damp, heavy, sticky, impossible to peel off. Saad stood at the doorway, gripping the wooden frame as if the wind might rip it away. She could hear the water. At first, it was only a faint trickle somewhere far off. Then it grew into a low, rolling roar like an animal running. The river behind the house was frightening even on ordinary days. Tonight it was a deep throat opening wide. The water rose. It spilled into the yard. It crept up to the steps. The red earth turned into soft, slick mud. The brown current carried rotting leaves, broken branches, trash things without names, as if the village itself were being peeled from the ground and thrown into the river. In one corner of the yard, a plastic basin floated upside down, spinning. A chicken was dragged past in the current, flapping for a few seconds, then gone. Saad watched it, her chest tightening. Not because she pitied the chicken, but because it made the truth impossible to ignore. Tonight, anything could be swept away. Anything. Everything. Inside the room, Mama Aduni sat curled up on a low bed. An old scarf was wrapped around her shoulders. She was shaking hard. Her skin was dark, her face lined by years, but under the oil lamp she still carried the gentleness of a Nigerian mother who had lived her whole life on patience. Her eyes were fixed on the doorway where Saad stood, as if Saad were the only thread still tying her to life. "Mama." "Stay right there," Saad said, forcing her voice to sound steady. But her voice trembled too. She didn't want to admit she was afraid, because if she admitted fear, she would have to face the deeper question beneath it. If everything collapses tonight, what will she do? Who will she save? Does she even have the strength to save anyone? Mama Aduni lifted a hand, weak as a leaf tugged by the wind. "My child, the water is so high." Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't a scream. It was a plea from someone who had spent her whole life trying not to burden anyone, even when her life was hanging by a thin thread. Saad felt goosebumps rise on her skin. Each word landed like raindrops falling straight into her chest. She stepped forward and stared into the darkness outside. The water had reached the step. It wasn't rushing. It was crawling upward slow, patient, as if it knew it would get in eventually. Somewhere far away, she heard shouting. A child crying. Voices calling each other. But distance made it all feel unreal, dreamlike, as if this house had been cut away from the world and left alone to face the wrath of water. Saad looked out. Then she looked back in. And she looked at her life poor, cramped, without a door out. In that moment, everything she had swallowed for months surged up inside her, like the rising flood itself. She saw the mornings she woke with no plan beyond survive another day. She saw the calls to Kunal where all she heard was his tired sigh, "I'm busy." She saw herself standing in the market, listening to women talk about Lagos, about lights, about beautiful clothes, about homes with white walls and shining tiled floors, while she stood there with a few small coins in her palm, feeling her life rotting slowly in the mud. And she saw Mama Aduni's eyes, gentle eyes, patient eyes, eyes that always seemed to apologize for being old, for being weak, for simply existing. Those eyes should have softened Saad. Instead, they tightened around her throat, because they reminded her that she was locked inside a responsibility with no end date. And inside Saad's mind, a cold voice rose clearer than the rain. If she were gone, I could breathe. The thought hit Saad like a slap. She froze. She hated herself instantly. She was a Nigerian woman, raised to believe a mother-in-law is a mother, raised to believe family is the root. She knew right from wrong. She knew there were lines that should never be crossed. But the rain kept pounding. The water kept climbing. And when nature begins to howl, the lines inside a human heart can turn thin as paper. Mama Aduni coughed again, clutching her chest. She looked at Saad, eyes wet. "My child, I'm afraid," just that. "I'm afraid." It wasn't blame, it wasn't a demand. It was the truest thing an old mother could say while facing death, and still calling my child like calling for shelter. Saad swallowed hard and turned her face away, because if she looked into Mama Aduni's eyes for one more second, she might rush forward and hold her. But then what? Hold her, and the water would still rise. Hold her, and tomorrow Saad would still wake up in this house, still stay, still wait for Kunal's call, still live the life of the one left behind. A violent gust slammed the door into the wall bang, and the whole house shook. The oil lamp wobbled. Darkness swallowed most of the light. In that flickering glow, Mama Aduni's face looked like an old photograph about to burn. Saad's breathing quickened. The house felt as if it were shrinking, pressing in, forcing her toward a wall with no escape. One moment. Just one moment. A moment people would later call losing control. But to Saad, it didn't feel like losing control. It felt like a door opening inside her mind, and on the other side was a thought simple enough to be cruel. Just one step, just one push, and everything would end. She moved closer to Mama Aduni. The old woman looked at her like hope. "Saad," she whispered, I don't want to die." The word die tightened around Saad's heart. Her vision blurred, not from tears of pity but from a storm of emotions colliding. Compassion, fear, anger, despair. She reached out. Mama Aduni grabbed her hand thin, cold, trembling. That hand had raised Kunnel, had carried water, had patched clothes. Now it clung to Saad like it was clinging to life itself. Saad pulled her up. Her mother-in-law was so light. Light like someone who had lived too long without anyone holding her. Mama Aduni swayed, feet slipping on the wet floor. "My child," she whispered. "Please, don't leave me." That sentence pierced Saad like a needle. It struck the softest place in her. In another world, it would have made Said hold her and say, "I'm here." But this was not another world. This was flood night. This was the house by the river. This was Saad's life bleeding out slowly day after day through poverty, loneliness, and promises abandoned in Lagos. Saad guided Mama Aduni toward the door. Water had entered the house now, rising to their ankles ice-cold, muddy, slick, smelling of the river's sour rot. Outside, the darkness was deep as a cliff. Mama Aduni shrank back, terrified. No outside. The water. Saad didn't answer. She only pulled. Mama Aduni begged, voice breaking. "Please, Saad, my child." Hearing please made Saad's spine go cold, but her grip stayed tight, as if letting go would make everything inside her explode, and she wouldn't have the strength to stand. They reached the step. The water roared beneath them. The yard had become a small rushing stream feeding straight into the river. Mama Aduni turned and looked back into the house as if it were the last time. Then she looked at Saad, her dark eyes full of terror, and something that almost looked like understanding. "Saad, why?" Saad didn't answer. Because answering would mean telling the truth. And the truth could not be spoken. One moment. Just one moment. Saad pushed. No scream. No witnesses. Only the river taking the old mother the way it seemed to have been waiting to all along. The next morning, Saad cried in front of the neighbors. The sun rose weakly, as if it was afraid to look directly at what had happened the night before. The rain had eased, but the ground was still soaked. Mud clung to feet like a memory that refused to let go. The river behind the house no longer roared. It flowed slower now, quieter. And it was that quietness that made people shiver. As if the river had eaten its fill, as if it was holding a secret in its belly and never planned to give it back. Saad stood in the middle of the yard, hair tangled, clothes damp, eyes swollen red. She performed the role of a woman who had just lost the most precious thing in her life. And the cruel part was, the performance wasn't entirely fake. Inside her, something was truly panicking. Not because she had lost her mother-in-law, but because she had just watched herself become the kind of person she used to despise. The neighbors came quickly when they heard. Nigerian women in head wraps of every color, bare feet stepping into mud, voices murmuring like wind threading through trees. A man still holding the flashlight from the storm swept the beam across the yard, across the path to the river, as if light could pull truth up out of the water. Saad broke down and dropped to her knees right at the doorway. Mud coated her knees, cold and thick. She clutched her chest like she was trying to keep her heart from breaking free and jumping out. Her sobs rose carefully, perfectly fractured. Mama slipped. "I didn't make it in time." She said it the way people recite a prayer they've memorized. But inside her, another voice answered cold and sharp. "She didn't slip. You pushed her." An older woman, Bisi, who lived a few houses away, ran forward and wrapped Saad in her arms, patting her back, choking on her own grief. "Oh God, Mama Aduni was so gentle," Saad cried harder, as if tears could wash last night away. But the more she cried, the filthier she felt. Her tears weren't clean. They were salty and heavy like mud. Everyone believed her. Because in this region, flood season is a familiar killer. People had lost children, husbands, whole roofs because of one wrong step. A river in the rainy season always looks reasonable as the culprit. It doesn't need a motive, it only needs water. They agreed to search. A few young men took rope and long poles and waded toward the riverbank. They stared down at the brown current, where branches and trash drifted past like broken pieces of someone's life. Someone shouted, "Do you see anything?" No one answered. Only water. Saad stood behind them, arms wrapped around her own shoulders like she was holding herself upright. She watched them search, and every time someone leaned closer to the river, her heart jolted as if a hand had yanked it. She wanted them not to find anything. And at the same time, she wanted it to end quickly. She wanted Mama Aduni's death to be confirmed, so her lie could become truth in everyone else's eyes. Because a lie is only terrifying while it can still be uncovered. Once the whole village believes it, it becomes a cloak black, heavy, but it covers you. A young man turned to her. "Where were you last night? Did anyone see Mama when she went outside?" Saad flinched. She softened her face, let her swollen eyes do the work, hid her panic behind redness. I was inside. Mama told me not to come out. It was too dark. And then I heard the water. I ran out and—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. People completed the rest with their imagination. And people's imagination is always easier to accept than the truth. Another woman sighed. "It's fate. Mama was old. This year's floods are brutal. Fate." Two words that fell like a hammer closing the lid on everything. Fate helps people sleep. It helps them stop asking questions. It gave Saad an exit, dirty, but an exit. She kept crying. The crowd kept murmuring. Some began talking about reporting it to the authorities. Others spoke of a funeral, no body, but still mourning. Because in the village, the dead don't always need full proof. The dead need to be cried for. The living need comfort. When Saad heard the word funeral, her throat tightened. She pictured a mat on the floor, a cheap wooden coffin, prayers. She imagined the name Mama Aduni being spoken through sobs, and suddenly her eyes burned truly. Because for the first time, a part of her understood the horror. Mama Aduni would be gone. No more soft coughing in the night. No more "have you eaten?" No more gentle eyes looking at her like a daughter. No more apologizing for being a burden. No more living in this house to remind Saad she had been given a trust she didn't deserve. Saad turned away and wiped her face. Her hands shook. Her nails bit into her skin until it stung. Then she remembered Kunal. The name struck like lightning. Kunal wasn't here. Kunal hadn't seen the mud, hadn't heard the river, hadn't smelled the dampness of death. Kunal was in Lagos inside a clean office, still running on schedule, but one phone call could stop that whole life. And Saad was the one who had to make it. She went inside. The wooden door creaked like an accusation. The room where Mama Aduni had sat the night before was empty now. Her old scarf was no longer on her shoulders. Only the low bed remained, and a damp stain on the floor. Saad stood there, staring at the emptiness, and felt as if someone was watching her from behind. She spun around, no one, only wind slipping through the window. She picked up her phone. Her finger hovered over the name Kunal. Her heart pounded. A part of her wanted to throw the phone away, run out of the village, disappear. But she knew she couldn't. No one disappears from guilt. It follows you like a shadow. She pressed call. It rang. Each ring was a heartbeat of sin. On the other end, Kunal answered, sounding like he'd just stepped out of a meeting. "Hello, babe." Saad opened her mouth. No sound came out. She had to inhale deeply. She had to become the grieving woman. She had to do it perfectly. Her voice broke. "Your mother. She's gone. Nothing else." She didn't need anything else. Those 4 words were a blade cutting the last thread tying Kunal to home. Saad heard Kunal's breath pull sharply inward, like someone had been hit with cold water. Silence. Silence. Saad thought the call had dropped. She stared at the screen, still connected. She heard something faint, maybe a chair scraping, maybe a hand hitting a desk. Then a sound cracked out of Kunal's throat, not a word, but a choke. "What?" he whispered. Saad shut her eyes. Tears spilled out. This time she couldn't tell if they were acting or real, maybe both. Maybe truth and lies inside her had fused beyond separation. She repeated it, shaking. The flood took her. I couldn't. On the other end, Connell didn't answer right away. There was a hollow space like all of Lagos had just lost power. Like horns, greetings, schedules, plans, everything stopped at once for a single moment. And in that moment, Connell went completely still. Connell left Lagos behind. No farewell, no time to pack. He simply rose from his office chair like a man yanked out of a dream. Everything around him was still bright, the fluorescent lights still white, the computer still on, keyboards still clicking, coworkers still talking about deadlines and contracts, but inside Connell's head, everything went dark. As if someone had just pulled the plug from his heart. He held his phone, staring at Saad still glowing on the screen. The words, "Your mother, she's gone," kept ringing in his ears like a bell that refused to stop. Part of him wanted to call back, demand details, scream that it couldn't be true. His mother was the strongest person he had ever known. She had survived hunger seasons, sickness, endless blackout nights. She had waited for him for years. How could she? But another part of him, older, harsher, more aware of how life works, knew death doesn't ask permission. And the river. The river back home had always been something that watched and waited. Every rainy season, it swallowed something. This time, it swallowed his mother. Connell walked out of the building, and Lagos struck him in the face like it always did. Horns, voices, shouting vendors, engines. This city had once been the place he believed would change his life, and it did. But now it also felt like a thief that had stolen the time he should have given his mother. He drove through the streets he knew so well, and suddenly everything felt unfamiliar. The towering billboards, the high rises, the glowing storefronts, all the things that used to fill him with pride now looked like cold blocks of concrete. He stared at them as if he were watching someone else's life. The life of a man who had won in the eyes of the world and lost in the eyes of his mother. On the way to the bus station, a light drizzle began. Not flood rain, just a soft, thin rain, but it was enough to make him shiver. He remembered his mother's voice. "The rainy season is coming, my son." Each time she said it, he answered, "Yes, Mama," and went right back to work. His mother lived by the river. That river didn't spare anyone. And he had left her there alone. Connell didn't even remember buying the ticket. He only remembered sitting by the window as the bus began to move, watching Lagos slide backward. The city became streaks of blurred light, then disappeared behind a curtain of rain. Connell felt like he was leaving a place that had fed him, to return to a place he had starved. The bus rolled through long roads, through small towns, through red dirt stretches still slick because the water hadn't fully drained. Every time the bus jolted, his chest tightened like someone had punched him. His mind wouldn't stop circling his mother, her voice, the way she said his name softly like a lullaby. Connell. Her hands rough but warm, the cheap shampoo scent in her hair, the phrases he once treated like ordinary. "Eat, my son. Sleep, my son. Don't let people teach you to forget home." And then it hit him. His mother had never demanded he be rich. She only needed him to be present. And he wasn't. Across the aisle, an older woman held a child in her arms. The baby slept against her shoulder, breathing steady. Connell stared at them, eyes burning. His mother should have had that too. A quiet place. Someone to care for her. Someone to say, "Mama, rest." But his mother had been taken by the river in the night. Connell covered his face. He didn't sob loudly. He just breathed, as if every breath was an attempt to keep himself from breaking open. When the bus reached the station near the village, the sky was gray. The wind carried the smell of mud and dark water. The village greeted him with a strange silence. The red dirt roads were broken in places, swampy in others. A roof had lost a corner to the storm. A fence lay collapsed. Trees leaned at odd angles. Everything looked like it had just fought a war with nature, and nature had won. Connell stepped down, and his city shoes sank into mud immediately. He stood there for a second, looking around, and felt like he didn't belong anymore. It was a strange feeling because this place had once been his root. But now the route was eroded by water, thinned by time, and abandoned by him. He walked fast toward the house. Each step felt like racing his own fear. In his mind, a foolish hope still flickered. Maybe Saad was wrong. Maybe his mother was only injured. Maybe she was at a neighbor's house. Maybe. There was still time to say I'm sorry before it was too late. But the moment he reached the gate, that hope died. The old iron gate hung half open. No voice calling, "Cunnel," like he had imagined 1,000 times. The yard was empty. No boiling pot, no smell of food, no rasping cough from his mother. Only wind moving through the open space, and the cold of a house missing a person. When he arrived, the house was hollow. No mother, only dampness. And fear. The damp smell clung to the walls, to his clothes, to his throat. The smell of floodwater draining, of things soaked too long, of a home no one had held together. But fear had no smell. It had a sensation. It gripped his heart the moment he stepped inside like an invisible hand. Saad ran out from the back room. Her hair was tied in a rush, her eyes swollen. She threw her arms around Cunnel, sobbing like the perfect widow of a mother-in-law. Cunnel stood stiff. He didn't hold her right away. His hands lifted, then fell, as if he didn't know where to put them. "Cunnel, I'm sorry," Saad choked. I didn't make it in time." Cunnel looked at her. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to hold her, lean on her, keep himself from collapsing. But something in Saad's voice chilled him, not because the lie sounded clumsy, but because it sounded too smooth. He stepped past her and walked straight into his mother's room. The small room where she used to sit every afternoon was now an emptiness carved into the house. The wooden chair still stood there, damp and dusty. The old blanket was folded neatly, but it no longer smelled like her. Cunnel stared, feeling a hand closing around his throat. He bent down and picked up one of his mother's old plastic sandals in the corner. Dry mud still clung to the sole like the trace of a hurried step. His heart pounded hard. He turned to Saad. "Where? Did it happen?" he asked, voice rough. Saad stammered. "Outside." She slipped. And then, Cunnel held her eyes. She looked away. It was a tiny movement. Barely anything. But it was enough. Cunnel stepped into the yard. He looked at the doorstep. The mud there was disturbed, like something had been dragged across it. He studied the footprints. Chaotic prints, but there was a long, unnatural skid mark. He wasn't a police officer, but he was the son of a woman who had lived with the earth her whole life. He understood what the ground was saying, if you were willing to listen. He turned to the neighbors. They came, offering condolences. One said, "The water was very high that night." Another said, "Saad was crying at dawn." Then a young man added, as if it meant nothing, "I saw Saad pulling Mama toward the door at night. But it was too dark, I'm not sure." Cunnel froze. Too dark, not sure. But inside Cunnel, something began to rise, not hope, suspicion. Small details began to misalign. A glance that avoided him, a sentence that slipped. Cunnel looked toward the river behind the house. The water still moved, brown and cold. It flowed as if nothing had happened. And suddenly he understood. The river wasn't the only one with blood on its hands. The river was just the place where secrets were kept. He turned back, to the house, to Saad, to the faces of the neighbors. Cunnel was no longer searching for hope. He was searching for the truth. They found her at the deepest bend of the river. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood. This was where the river kept the things it never intended to return. The water there was darker, colder, wrapped in a strange stillness, not the stillness of peace, but the stillness of something that had swallowed too much. The gray sky hung low above them, like a massive mourning cloth draped over the entire village. Men lined the riverbank, ropes and long poles in their hands. They stared into the brown water, eyes strained as if they could pierce through it. Behind them stood a few Nigerian women, head wraps soaked from the rain, lips pressed tight. No one cried loudly. In the village, People were used to loss, but no one ever got used to watching it rise out of a river. Cunnel stood at the water's edge. He no longer looked like the man from Lagos. No crisp shirt. No scent of air conditioning. No posture of success people liked to assign to him. Now he was just a son who had come too late. His face was pale. His eyes were red. His lips cracked and dry. He stared at the river the way one stares at a court with no judge. The water slowed, as if it too were tired of carrying the secret for so long. Someone shouted, voice breaking, "There's something's there." A dark shape surfaced among branches and debris. A rope was thrown. Hands pulled slowly, carefully, as if one hard tug might shatter the truth. Water splashed up, icy, mixed with mud. The stench hit hard. One man turned away, gagging. A woman behind him covered her mouth, but her sharp breathing slipped through like a cry swallowed whole. The dark shape drifted closer to shore. Cunnel took one step forward, then stopped. His feet felt nailed to the ground. Part of him wanted to run, to avoid it, to keep his mother forever in the state of unconfirmed. Because while she was still in the river, she was still a vague terror. But once she reached the shore, she would become an undeniable truth, something that could not be undone, something that could not be fixed. The rope tightened. They pulled again. And then she was there. Mama Aduni. Her thin body looked almost weightless after the river released her. Her headscarf was still on, faded, soaked in mud, a final sign that she had once been a mother, a woman, a human being. Cunnel saw the scarf and felt his heart tear open. He remembered the day he left home, how she had tied it neatly, then smiled at him as if nothing were wrong. A man whispered, "God." No one dared look for long. But Cunnel did. He stared as if blinking might make her disappear again. Cunnel stepped into the water. The cold sliced into his skin like knives. Mud slipped under his feet. He didn't care. He moved straight toward her, drawn by the only thing left in his life. The men tried to stop him. "Cunnel, let us." He shook his head. His eyes never left his mother. "No," he said, voice thick. "That's my mother." The water reached his waist. He bent down and reached out. His hand touched her skin, so cold it jolted him like electricity. And in that instant, everything inside him collapsed. Every meeting, every contract, every achievement he had once been proud of, all of it became meaningless before this cold. His hands began to shake violently. He pulled her into his arms. Her body was cruelly light like a child's. Cunnel held her tight, as if letting go would let the river take her again. His forehead pressed into her scarf. Mud smeared across his face. He didn't wipe it away. He just held her like a desperate man clutching the one thing life had already stolen. A sound tore out of his chest, ugly, broken, wordless. It was the sound of a man raised in the silence of poverty. A man who had learned to swallow his emotions whole, now flooding open like a dam bursting. He clutched her and sobbed, "I'm sorry. I left you alone." Saad did not escape. She did not run. She did not scream. She did not beg the way people imagine a guilty person would. She sat quietly in the small room of the village station, hands resting on her knees, her back straight, but her shoulders collapsed like a house that had lost its central pillar. The weak ceiling light fell on the face of the Nigerian woman, no longer sharp, no longer defiant, only exhaustion, down to the bone. The truth did not arrive like thunder. It came through small details. A story that didn't align. A skid mark before the doorstep. A glance that slipped away when the night rain was mentioned. And finally, a silence that lasted too long. The kind of silence only carried by those holding something they cannot say. The truth always finds its way to shore, just like the body of the old mother. When Saad lowered her head and confessed, no one cheered. No one cursed her. Only a long sigh moved through the room, heavy like steam after rain. A neighboring woman covered her mouth. A man turned his face away. Not because they pitied Saad, but because they had just seen something more frightening. an ordinary human being who had gone too far in a single moment of desperation. Saad spoke very softly, her voice nearly empty. I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted everything to stop. No one answered, because there was no answer to that sentence. I wanted everything to stop was not a reason. It was simply the naked truth of someone who had reached the end of the road. As they led Saad away, she turned her head and looked outside. The sky was gray. The red dirt road still bore the marks of mud. The old house stood silent, as if it had never witnessed anything at all. No one saw her off. No one held her back. In this place, people were used to letting guilt walk its own path. Kunal stood at the end of the road. He did not step forward. He did not step back. He stood there like a post driven into the ground by his own choices. There was no anger left in his eyes, no hope either. Only a fatigue so deep there was no room left for tears. Saad saw him. For a brief moment, her eyes trembled, as if she wanted to say something. An apology, an explanation, a final word. But Kunal did not look back. He turned away before she could open her mouth. Because some apologies, when they arrive too late, are only noise. Kunal did not ask for leniency for his wife. When they asked if he wanted to say anything, he shook his head. He did not defend her. He did not blame poverty. He did not blame pressure. He did not blame the stormy night. He understood that if he spoke to spare Saad, he would have to face another question, one he did not have the courage to answer. If I had come home earlier, would any of this have been different? He did not ask. Because he knew there were sins that could not be divided and carried together. After the funeral, Kunal stayed in the house for a few more days. Not because there was anything left to do, but because he no longer knew where to go. Each morning, he swept the yard, fixed the doorstep, picked up objects his mother had once touched. He cooked for himself, then left the food unfinished. Every afternoon, he sat on the porch, watching the river flow by, quiet now, like something that had already finished its work. People told him, "Don't blame yourself. It's over." Kunal heard them, but he did not accept it. Because he knew, the most painful part was not losing his mother. The most painful part was understanding that he had lost her long before the river ever reached her. On the last night before leaving the village, Kunal stood before his mother's empty room. He placed his hand against the old wall and closed his eyes. He did not beg. He did not make promises. He simply stood there, long enough for the pain to settle into something heavier than grief. Responsibility. Kunal did not seek forgiveness for himself. Because he understood this, some mistakes do not need to be forgiven. They need to be carried as a lifelong reminder of the cost of absence. The river didn't take my mother. It only carried her away. What killed her was the silence of those who should have protected her. Pause due south. Some losses don't come from hate. They come from absence. And some apologies arrive only to identify a body.